Astrocast. I'm your host, Rue. Today is Tuesday, December 31st, 2024. Black Moon has just passed. It's the end of the year. Great time of year. Always love the holidays. Had a good week off of work. Got to hang out with my family. Got to have some fun. Got to play some games. Got to sleep in for a week. Oh man, I love sleeping in. Sleeping in at my house generally means, 7:30, 8 o'clock. So there were a couple of days where I got to, I think 9 o'clock. My wife was already up at 7, of course, because she has a morning routine that she pretty much religiously follows. And I am very thankful for her doing that routine as it involves taking care of our pets. So I try to, take the dogs out in the night and she handles them in the morning along with the bird. And together we are a great team. Anyway, thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Rue. It's the end of the year, and what a year it has been. Not just for us here at the Astrocast, but also for astronomy and astrophotography as a whole. I really feel like the hobby has exploded this year. A lot of the new technology has come out that is making it easier and easier for people to, get a foot in the door with this hobby without having to go out and spend $5,000 to get a basic rig set up. I can pretty much guarantee you the most popular telescope right now, without a doubt, is going to be the C-Star S30. The pre-orders are sold out pretty much everywhere. I can't find one anyway. And not that I want one, to be frank, but that I respect people who, need to get their foot in the door for an inexpensive smart telescope. They truly cannot be beat. And honestly, I'm just really thankful to ZWO as a company for advancing astrophotography as a whole. I know that there are pros and cons to this company. I know that a lot of people are not fans of their somewhat walled in ecosystem. I say somewhat because they don't require you to use a ZWO mount, for example, though they do require you to use their, I'm trying to think. I can use my Canon Rebel and R5 and R7 no problem with the ASI Air. I don't know if like QHY cameras work with it. That I'm not entirely sure of. I know that in some respects it is a little bit of a walled garden. But that being said, I would say as a whole, the ASI Air has made astrophotography so much more easily digestible for the masses. I'm a pretty bright guy. I'm very, very tech savvy. That's what I do for a living, is I work in technology. But I can tell you, before I got my ASI Air, whenever I was, setting up out in the field, for those of us who do not have a permanent observatory yet, having to set up and break down can be a very time consuming process. And it was pretty annoying having to open up 5 different applications and keep drivers up to date and this, that, and the third. When I got my ASI Air, that opened up a whole new window of opportunity for me, and that, it only took me 5 minutes to get set up instead of half an hour or 45 minutes. So anyway, my rant on ZWO is over. Needless to say, they've had a huge year with astrophotography, but other companies have as well, including our partners at Dark Dragons Astro, sponsors of the show. If you have not listened to that episode, I highly recommend you go back and listen. It was a couple episodes ago. We sat down with the co-founders of Dark Dragons Astro, and we talked all things astronomy for, a good hour and a half at least. Definitely our longest episode to date on the channel. And honestly, one of the best, even though the quality was not up to my particular standards, because we were kind of recording on my phone in the field. I didn't even have my DJI mics with me. I wasn't planning on doing that podcast when I got down there that night, but everybody was there and it was just such a great opportunity. I did not want to pass it up. Now, that being said, that episode went so well that going into 2025, we are planning on doing more of the group episodes of the show. And you can also look forward to many, many more interviews because I've been talking with Jeff from Dark Dragons, and he knows quite a few people that actually would like to be interviewed on the show. I want to put a call out also. I talked about on last week's episode of the radio astronomy episode of the Astrocast, I mentioned the project, the Jove project rather, which is a really cool project that NASA does, basically to allow amateurs to get into radio astronomy. And I actually, I'm trying to think back. Did I mention the Jove project? I can't even remember. I need to go back and listen to the episode. I meant to nonetheless. The Jove project is an excellent program that NASA has that actually allows amateurs like ourselves to take part in radio astronomy. And you can actually purchase, very inexpensive gear from them to start doing radio astronomy at home. That's easy to set up right out of the box. And they also sell DIY kits where you can build your own antenna receiver and those sorts of things. But in any case, I reached out to a few of the members of the Jove project and have unfortunately not heard back yet. I would really like to interview a radio astronomer. That is high on my list of things to do in 2025. So if any of my intrepid listeners are out there and you know a professional or amateur radio astronomer, I would certainly love to talk to them about radio astronomy. So if you have a tip and would like to email it to me, the email address is roo, R-O-O, astrocast@gmail.com. So I thought today would be fun for us to have a look back over 2024 and go over some of the topics that we discussed, and also just kind of highlight the highlights of 2024 as a whole for astronomy. This was a banner year for astronomy. We had so many awesome events happen this year that it might be difficult to list them all and talk in depth about them, but we will certainly give it a try. I also want to talk about some of the feedback that we saw in the general public as well as the media in 2024. I can actually start. I want to start at the beginning of 2024, but before we go there, I wanted to mention, just because I briefly mentioned it during the intro, the black moon, the so-called black moon, is a term used in astronomy to describe two new moons in a single calendar month. And it is a fairly rare event. As we know, the lunar cycle is a little over 29 days long. So black moons are rare because since lunar cycles are 29 days long, it's pretty rare to get two new moons in a single calendar month. It only happens roughly every 29 months. So it's not like super duper incredibly rare, but it is worth mentioning at least, since it was, in the media quite a bit over the last week. But we can't really talk about 2024 without talking about kind of the biggest event of the year as far as non-astronomers were concerned, and one of the earlier events, not the earliest event, but we're going to start back on April 8th of 2024 with the North American solar eclipse.
And so I'd suggest you watching that one first. But some of the comments were that I didn't address some of the events that people feel are significant related to this coming eclipse. One of the major ones that people cited is that the April 8th, 2024 eclipse will pass over 7 cities named Nineveh. So let's discuss why people feel this is so significant and the legitimacy of these claims as signs of the second coming.
Okay, enough of that incredibly stupid shit. Forgive me for saying that, but this really, really aggravated me whenever it happened this year. We had a whole lot of crazy religious dogma being spread about the total solar eclipse. People do not understand just the very basic pattern of an orbit for a planet. And pretty much everything that orbits the Earth takes this particular kind of elongated S-shaped path. And the fact of the matter is, this is the exact same path that you will see for every single eclipse that will ever happen or ever has happened. But because they cherry picked another solar eclipse that had happened somewhat recently, in fact, an annular versus a total solar eclipse, they decided that this meant that God was coming back and he was going to wreak havoc upon the earth for disrespecting him astronomically. Now, please understand, this is not to bash on religion at all. I have a lot of friends who are very religious, and I am extremely respectful of that. This had nothing to do with religion, though. This was just absolute fear mongering dogma at its best. People were taking advantage of a situation where others were ignorant and trying to scare them to gather a whole lot of views, which is pretty much just, internet clout and in some cases, unfortunately, monetary gain. So I saw a whole lot of that. I actually released a couple of videos on my TikTok channel. I don't watch TikTok like ever, but I do occasionally put up videos. If you ever want to check them out, you can find me on there. I'll link it in the show notes. Just combating the hysteria around the eclipse and explaining what is actually happening and why that path is not unique at all. But just like in numerology, if we make enough crazy connections, we can explain away everything and make everything sound terrifying. And that's exactly what these people did. No matter, what you said, they would, read through God knows what, historical documents, et cetera, and just try to find different ways to make it sound scary to people that an eclipse was happening. So that being said, it was an absolutely incredible moment for the folks who did get to witness it. And I, as a whole, very, very much enjoyed the energy, so to speak, around the 2024 eclipse, and that it got a lot of people looking up at the skies, even though it was daytime skies, hopefully with eye protection, definitely with eye protection. They were still looking up and therefore being amateur astronomers for the day. And I wouldn't doubt if a few listeners out there found the Astrocast during the whole total eclipse situation that was happening, so they could hear a little bit more about it. One of our best episodes this year was actually significantly about the total eclipse. So we definitely took advantage of that situation ourselves, but we made sure to do it truthfully and explain what was actually happening with the total solar eclipse. Now, the reason that the North American eclipse was so special was, historically speaking, it was the most viewed eclipse in the history of humans because of the path that it took, running over the cities that it did. More people were able to see it than have ever seen an eclipse before. So a lot of people got to appreciate this beautiful phenomenon. I myself, unfortunately, did not get to witness the total solar eclipse of 2024. It just wasn't in the bag. I tried. Actually, truth be told, I didn't try just because I had such a paralyzing fear of spending all that money to book a room, because hotels were crazy expensive unless they were booked very far in advance, which I certainly could have done knowing it as I did. But I had a fear of getting clouded out, and I didn't know if I would be able to, take the time off of work that would be needed and be flexible enough and all that. And I decided I was going to pass. But the reason I decided that I was going to pass was because I was able to witness the total solar eclipse back in 2017. We were able to actually drive about 45 minutes down to a small town in South Carolina that was within the path of totality. And I think we got something like 2.5 minutes, if I remember correctly, of totality. And it was an incredible view, no doubt about it. I got a really cool video of it That was prior to me being an astronomer, truly speaking. But I, certainly recognized the importance of the event. I brought a good camera. I had a filter, and I ended up, my best video actually was with my cell phone during totality, because it was cloudy that day, but there happened to be a break in the clouds right when we were at totality, and I got just an incredible shot of it. But like I said before, had I not seen that 2017 total solar eclipse, I have no doubt that I would have been going above and beyond to make sure that I could see 2024. But, not to say I won't ever see one again. I absolutely would love to see another total solar eclipse, but you know how it is. Life gets in the way, and we can only do so much when we're working and having our families and all the other things that come up in life. And one quick, interesting little fact that you may or may not know, the 2024 North American solar eclipse was actually the longest solar eclipse that we have had thus far in the 21st century, with a maximum totality of 4 minutes and 28 seconds, which actually took place down in, is it Durango? Yeah, Durango, Mexico actually had the longest length of total totality. I think that's a bit of a oxymoron. Would oxymoron be the proper word there? I don't know. This is a discussion that probably so many of us have had when you're trying to explain to people the difference between 99 and 100%. And like intuitively, if you're not an astronomer, you could see how it's easy to think, come on, what's the big deal? 1%. But like, knowing at what we do about eclipses, it's literally the difference between night and day. So 99% means that the sun is still out, essentially, and 100% means it's going to get dark. You don't say so, Pastru. At the time, I thought it was pretty obvious to most folks, the difference between 99% and 100% with the solar eclipse, but it turns out it was not. And I actually had quite a few people tell me, almost like upset with me because, I'm the astronomy guy. Man, I was in 90% area and I couldn't see nothing, man. It got like dim outside and it was kind of weird, but like I tried looking directly at the sun without no eclipse glasses, and I burned my retinas. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but there were legitimately a lot of questions around why you couldn't see the eclipse, quote unquote, if you were not in totality. And of course, the reason for that is our sun is incredibly bright. And if you block out 99.9% of it and let that 0.1% through, it's still going to burn your eyes because it is just insanely bright. So 2024 North American solar eclipse, without a doubt, one of the coolest highlights of 2024. I think my stage presence has grown a little bit since then. I actually think it would be fun to step back from April for a moment and let's just listen back to the very first episode of the Astrocast for a moment. Welcome to the Astrocast. My name is Rue. Thank you for joining me today. This is a new podcast that I'm starting because I have noticed a distinct lack of astrophotography related podcasts on the market today. And I really wanted to bring something that I would truly enjoy to hear and that I know a lot of people that I talk with and work with on a regular basis would also really enjoy to hear. So that's why I'm here today. Just to give you my background, I'm a big fan of the Jodcast. I used to listen to that, every episode that came out, but about a year ago, they stopped recording and all I could find online was, 5 or 10 minute quick podcast telling you about what was in the night sky for any given week. And while I love those, they weren't scratching the itch that I was going for. Wow. What a charmer that guy was, huh? The incredibly heavy breathing between every single sentence and then plugging another podcast within the first 30 seconds of my own show. Smooth move, Rue. Nah, I'm just kidding though. I love the Jodcast. And believe it or not, since I recorded that episode, they have actually started putting new episodes out again. So shout out to our friends over at the Jodcast. If you guys have heard the Astrocast, you were my original inspiration for the show. But please don't leave and go listen to the Jodcast. Maybe check them out afterwards if that's okay. All right. So what happened after April 8th? If you have a good memory, you can remember the exact date of the next big astronomical event that occurred. I know I certainly do. For me, it was without a doubt the co-highlight of 2024. If I'm being honest, it's if it were a co-main event, this would have been the final fight, because to me, this was just absolutely incredible. And I am, of course, referring to the May 10th Aurora Borealis event. It was just absolutely incredible. I can remember it like it was yesterday. And I got so lucky with the timing on this one. You know, we cannot predict when events like these are going to occur, although they are occurring at more regular intervals since we are at the 20-year cycle of solar maximum. We certainly can't predict whenever a huge storm on the sun is going to happen and send beautiful aurora as far south as 25-30 degrees in the northern hemisphere. That being said, we were able to get a few hours of a heads up. Luckily, we have excellent scientific instruments and scientists on planet Earth that monitor our sun at all times, and they were able to spot exactly what was coming.
A lot of buzz online. I was just answering some questions about this. There is a geomagnetic storm going on. If you don't know what that is, that's basically the impacts from a solar flare a couple of days ago impacting our upper atmosphere. And while there's all kinds of weird things that can happen with communication, we're not expecting widespread issues. The bigger issue, and probably the cooler part of this, is the Aurora Borealis, or the Northern Lights, can be seen pretty far to the south. Now, in the Carolinas, there's a chance. It's not a huge chance, but I do think it's a better chance if you have long exposure photography, meaning you're not going to see it with the naked eye. But if you set a camera up in a very, very dark location looking north and give it a 10, 15, 20-second exposure, you might catch them. But you have to have dark location. In the city lights, you're not going to see these in Charlotte at all because of light pollution. It's just too bright here. You're going to have to be in a very rural location. But we're getting pictures already from Europe, and it's spectacular. It's nice.
So that was Brad Panovich, our local meteorologist here in Charlotte. He's a little bit of a local rock star. I've mentioned him on the show a few times. Hope to interview him on the show in 2025. That'll be one of the goals for the Astrocast into next year. But I happened to catch one of his broadcasts earlier that Friday. It was a Friday, which is another one of the reasons why I was able to do what I did. Luckily, I did not have to work the next day. So when I got this news, I'll just let you hear what I did. By my fingers. So first thing I did is I went to my wife and I said, do you mind if I go chasing this aurora tonight? And she knew how important it was to me. So she, of course, said that's perfectly fine. She is not one who likes to stay up super late at night out in freezing cold, which I completely understand. That is not for everyone. But she did want to make sure that somebody was going with me. So I called up a couple friends. One couldn't go, one could go. So I talked to him and he said he was down for making the trip. And then I started my search. And I say I started my search because I wasn't going to go further south, which would be where I would normally go to get a dark sky. Normally, I would just, go down to the Astronomy Club and, hang out there under Bortle 4 skies that are pretty great, all things considered. But for this particular night, I knew I needed to head north because I am in Charlotte, North Carolina, as many of you know. And what the predictions were saying was it could be as low as the Carolinas, but, being the person I am, I wanted to make, quite sure that I gave myself the best possible chance to see these that I could. So my bet was to head up into the Blue Ridge Mountains. So what I did was I first opened up lightpollutionmap.info, which is a site that I've mentioned many times on the show. And it's an excellent resource if you ever need to find a dark site, especially if it's a situation like this where something comes up and you need to go somewhere and you don't really know, where you're going to go necessarily. Like me, I wanted to find a spot that was as high elevation as possible and as dark as possible, and ideally away from people if possible. And I'll tell you why that's important later. But so I started looking on light pollution map, and I ended up in an area right near the North Carolina and Virginia border, but on the western side where the Blue Ridge Mountains are. And the reason I was looking there is because the average elevation was around 2,800 to 3,000 feet, or, roughly 800 to 900 meters. So I knew that that was kind of my area that I wanted to be in. So once I had that picked out and I knew that it was Bortle 3 skies at 3,000 feet elevation, which is something that I have not experienced yet, I might add. I have seen Bortle 1. I guess technically there are 2, but I consider it 1. I won't get into the details, but it's at sea level. So, the seeing's not great because of that. So 3,000 feet, very, very, very good. And I'll get into the specifics when we get to that part. But I opened up Google Earth. So I actually downloaded Google Earth Pro for desktop. You can run Google Earth through a web browser now. But since I was doing a pretty in-depth hunt, I wanted every tool possible available to me. So I went ahead and downloaded Google Earth Pro. And I started searching up and down in that area for a place that looked good. And when you're looking for a place where you want to go for one night to image, and this isn't necessarily, just for when aurora happened. This might be, let's say that, there's any cosmic event that's happening and you want to go somewhere that's really good and dark. This is an excellent method, and it's one that I've used many times to great success. So open up Google Earth and start looking around. And one of the places that often works well for me is a graveyard, because graveyards oftentimes don't have any trees. They're a lot of times in big open fields. And sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes they don't have too many houses around them. So if you can find a public graveyard that is in a very dark area, Bortle 3 or better, then you're going to be in a great spot.
Let me just say, this is utterly hilarious. This is the first time I mentioned going to a graveyard as a great idea.
If you're going out to the middle of nowhere, that is the last thing that you should do. If you know somebody that has land out in the middle of the nowhere, obviously check with them, and that would be a great way to go. But I didn't know anyone up there. So a public place like a graveyard is excellent because I don't have anything to hide. If anybody
Graveyards are excellent.
The red headlamp will generally give you away to anyone that's passing by if they want to, stop and ask what you're doing or what have you. But again, if you're just parked quietly in a graveyard and not bothering anyone, I don't think
I keep talking about how great graveyards are. I mean, they are. They're really great astronomical sites, but God, that's funny.
So I didn't have anyone stop by. We did have a couple of cars pull up at one point, but I think they were just pulling up to see if they could view the northern lights as well. So I located the site. So after searching for a good solid hour and a half, I found what I considered to be the perfect spot for viewing. So it was a graveyard, as you might have guessed, and it was up in a town called Indian Valley, Virginia, which is a really small town.
Side note, I had so many people reach out to me and ask for the specific address that I viewed the aurora at, which I didn't give to anyone. But
from 5 to 6, and I wanted to wait until that storm was gone. So went and picked up my buddy right around 6, and we started heading north. And after about 3 hours, we ended up getting there. And it was very, very, very dark up there. And I mean
dark. So I can't really speak.
God, those are some of the best skies I've ever seen. If that one damn light hadn't been there, the guy that was down at the bottom of the mountain, it would have probably been best skies I'd ever seen.
On Friday, I stayed as long as I could. I stayed until the aurora died down. But man, I wish I could have seen the Milky Way overhead, because I would have loved to have.
All right, just about enough of that. But anyway, guys, the aurora on May 10th was incredible. And those instructions, by the way, are still very much valid, not just for aurora hunting, but looking for dark skies in general. The combination of lightpollutionmap.info and Google Earth Pro is just invaluable when it comes to finding great dark sky locations. And although I find it incredibly hilarious listening back to it now, I will say graveyards really are a good spot for a quick night's dirty work when you're out and about. Just don't bring any shovels or you might get some kind of strange looks. So yeah, the aurora was truly something special. But luckily for us, there was still another incredible event waiting for us in 2024. Now, astronomers knew that it was probably coming, but we weren't really sure if it was going to really be a spectacular event or not, because, with comets, anytime they are approaching the sun, there is a very real possibility that they are going to burn up when they get to their perihelion, which is, their closest approach to the sun. So we weren't really too sure if C2023A3 was going to make it or not. Luckily for us, it very much did make it. And I'm not going to play a clip, but I'll rather just kind of recap my thoughts on the comet from this year. It was really incredible. First of all, I really hope that you were able to see it at its brightest point. At its brightest point, from not very dark skies, I would say Bortle 5 here in Charlotte, North Carolina, we were able to see it naked eye. And that was just one night. Me, my wife, and a good friend of ours, the friend that always goes on the dark sky trips with me, we went to just a place 15 minutes away, and we got quite lucky, and it was right there. So if you've never seen a naked eye comet before, it really is something special. It's very, very, very cool to see. Some of us older folks probably remember Hale Bopp coming through. You may have been lucky enough to see Neowise. I think Hale Bopp, I know Neowise was a great comet. I know it was naked eye, but it was really low on the horizon, only visible, really early in the morning, just before sunrise, I believe, in the Northern Hemisphere. Neowise came right before I got back into astronomy, and I missed the wagon on that one, unfortunately. I know that 2024's comet, anecdotally speaking, probably was not as great as Neowise, because it was just so much brighter. But it was a really, really awesome event nonetheless. I was able to get some spectacular photographs of the comet. I actually made several trips, both when it was in the evening skies and the pre-dawn skies, to try and see it, because I wanted to make sure that I was able to, see this event happening no matter what. And I indeed, ran that dream down, as they say, and very happy that I was able to do that. We have an upcoming comet in January. However, I don't think this one is going to be visible in the Northern Hemisphere. For all of our Southern Hemisphere friends, you might have something very much to look forward to. It is another Atlas found comet. Let me get the name of it. All right, so that is actually G3. So also, it's not C2023, it's C2024 G3, found by the Atlas Observatory. We have a whole episode where I actually go over the naming conventions for comets, and that actually took place right around the comet episode. Let me find that one. So yeah, that was episode 34, actually. It was titled A Great Comet Approaches in all caps. And I really enjoyed, side note, the naming convention on this episode, because just a few weeks prior, I actually recorded an episode that was also titled A Great Comet Approaches, but with a question mark, as in, will this be a great comet? And then after it survived perihelion and became apparent that it was going to be a naked eye object for much of the population, I made the next episode entitled it A Great Comet Approaches in all caps with a period instead of a comma. So that was just something I really enjoyed, a little Easter egg for our longtime listeners of the Astrocast. So me specifically, though, I took photos of this comet with pretty much every piece of astrophotography gear that I own. When I was out doing the pre-dawn photos way down in South Carolina on the lake, I actually used my 135 rig. So the Rokinon 135, very famous, budget-friendly astrophotography lens, in combination with my ASI 294 MC Pro color camera. And I was able to get some pretty good pictures of it. I won't say they were spectacular, but they were pretty good. And I was just honestly thrilled to be able to see the comet. I remember it was so funny. I went down there. I got up at like 3 o'clock in the morning that day, and I headed down to Lake Norman. Actually, I'm sorry, Lake Wiley. I always get the two confused. Lake Norman's north of Charlotte. Lake Wiley is south of Charlotte. But anyway, I headed down there, and I had found a boat landing actually at the lake. And the reason I had picked that spot is because the tree line is so low. It's far enough away because of the big body of water that you don't really have to worry about the trees cutting off your view. Which is obviously a good thing if you're trying to see something very low on the horizon. And it worked out really well, but it was hilarious because once I finally got everything working properly, which is a little bit tricky anytime you're dealing with a comet because it's not just a regular star in the night sky. So your framing can be a little tricky. Locating it can be a little bit tricky depending on what you're using. I know the ASI Air was not playing very friendly with me that day. I think I ended up having to go into live mode, if I remember correctly, and I just kind of manually moved to an area where I was able to see the comet, and then I took my photos that way. But anyway, as I was doing all this and getting photos of the comet, I was in a really dark parking lot. I got super lucky with the spot that I picked because there were no street lamps, which was great because obviously you don't want street lamps if you're trying to photograph a dim object. And I just heard, "What's going on?" right behind me. And I nearly crapped my pants. I turned around and there was a police officer standing right there. Well, he wasn't standing. He was hanging out of his car. And he was looking at, obviously I must have appeared suspicious. I'm like some guy who's down by the water with electronic equipment, futzing about at 4:30 in the morning. But I explained to him what I was doing, and he instantly became like a 12-year-old boy and was super excited. Really, really nice guy. Forgive me, I can't remember his name, but I know I did mention it on the episode where we talked about the comet because I did tell that story back then. But that's one of those awesome memories that I'll always have thanks to astronomy. Side note, he did also check out the photographs of the comet. I was able to show him, and he was absolutely blown away by them. Real quick, just to note, on the Aurora Borealis, I will say, ever since that happened, my just news feeds in general, and I'm not talking just social media, but like Google News and, any kind of news that comes my way via the algorithm is constantly serving me news on possible aurora sightings. And I'm like, guys, I live all the way down in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's 35 degrees. Highly, highly unlikely that we're going to get another solar storm, every few weeks that's going to reach me. Now, I understand if you're, up near New Hampshire and, higher up north in United States of America that you might want to keep up with those sorts of things, because you have a very real possibility of seeing the northern lights from those longitudes, or I'm sorry, latitudes rather. But I'm probably not going to see them. And I only mention it just in case you guys have a similar situation. Feel free to ignore those. They're clickbaiting you. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be like a G3 or lower storm. Not to say a G3 isn't a great storm. It absolutely is. But what we experienced back in May was a G5 storm, a whole different level of activity, and obviously much more far reaching as far as the northern lights are concerned. I mentioned this in particular because I know tonight we have a northern lights, warning in effect that I see popping up everywhere. And it probably will get to the northern parts of New Hampshire, and it may even get lower. And there's always the chance that I could be wrong and it could be upgraded to a higher level. But chances are, if you're like me down here, 35 or below, you probably won't be seeing anything tonight. But again, all the more reason why it makes what happened back in May just so very, very special. Now, there were lots of other really great events that happened throughout 2024. Obviously, we had the standard meteor showers, although I will say rather that I don't think we had any spectacular meteor showers this year, just because the moon phases seem to all be at or near full moon whenever the good ones rolled around. We did have some cool conjunctions. Mars and Jupiter had a pretty close approach on May 18th. And of course, we had the annular partial lunar eclipse. We do have a blood moon upcoming this year in 2025. And that's actually not too far away. That'll be happening March 13th through the 14th, and will be fully visible across North and South America. If you haven't seen a total lunar eclipse, it is really an incredible sight. Obviously, this is what happens whenever the Earth's shadow falls on the moon with the sun directly behind it, and it falls in such a way that blocks out all the light. The light that is actually reflecting from the Earth's surface is what gives the lunar surface its eerie red glow, which is why we call it a blood moon. I actually was able to photograph the last total lunar eclipse, which was back in November of 2022. That was an incredible night. I'm trying to think, what did I use to photograph that? I believe, I used my doublet, actually. I got out my big telescope. That was when I was still using a Canon Rebel. I didn't have an astronomy camera yet. Did I? No. 2022. I definitely had an astronomy camera by then. So I take that back. I know I did use the Rebel, though. Maybe I was using it with a different lens and getting different shots. In fact, I think that's what it was. But I will certainly be looking forward to this next total lunar eclipse. And I am going to attempt to get a time lapse of the lunar eclipse as it happens. I love the photos where you see the different phases of a lunar eclipse happening. So it'll show the moon like a dozen different times with totality being in the center. And I'd like to make one of those for myself. So that's going to be my goal for this year's total lunar eclipse, weather permitting, of course. It's so funny because we talk about these events in advance, like we're absolutely going to be able to see them. But unfortunately, as we all know all too well, that is not always the case. Cloudy weather, bad seeing, rain, full moon, depending on what you're trying to see, meteor showers, for example, just really do ruin astronomical events a lot of the time. One of the big focuses of mine in 2024 was just spreading awareness for light pollution. Light pollution is getting really bad in Charlotte. In particular, we're having just this huge influx of LED lights. If you drive around Charlotte, you can still find quite a few sulfur diode lamps for street lamps. but they are slowly being replaced by the obnoxious broadband blue LED lights. And one of the other highlights that we had in 2024 was me actually guest hosting on the Backyard Naturalist. Let's have a quick listen in there.
Again, beautiful night skies, pitch black, dark when it got dark. Because everybody went to bed when it got dark pretty much too. So we didn't need street lights. They didn't have them. But in Atlanta, again, we still had that. We were 6 miles from downtown Atlanta and we still had really good views of the stars. And I remember the Milky Way very
well. Imagine Alaska.
Oh, I can't. I just, wow.
What was that like?
Yeah, northern lights. We could hear them, see them, the Milky Way, all that. Yeah, it was just.
It must be incredible.
The sky was full of stars. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And you forget what it looked like.
Yeah, you do. I mean, I just recently, I saw something, I don't remember where I was, and I thought, if I didn't know any better, I think that might be part of the Milky Way, but I thought, man, it can't be. And that made me think, when was the last time I saw the Milky Way?
That's what I thought too. Just looking at your pictures, I'm like, wow, it's been a long time since I've seen that.
A lot of people say, and honestly, I couldn't remember seeing the Milky Way as a child. It might have been because no one just said, hey, look up at the right time of the year because it's more visible at certain times of the year. The first time I truly saw it with my own eyes was just 3 years ago. And it was what I would call a religious experience. It really was. It was breathtaking seeing that with my own eyes for the first time. And I think a lot of people just don't understand what they're missing out on. You go outside and you see our night skies and you're like, yep, there's the stars.
Yeah.
But
that's pretty.
If only you knew what is hiding just beneath that gray blanket that we have cast ourselves over our entire environment.
Yeah. And when we have things like street lights, it affects our vision because our eyes adapt to that. So it takes, I think I read 20 to 30 minutes for your eyes to unadapt to that so that you can actually see what's up there. And we don't take that time. I know when I want to see something, I tend to run outside really fast and then run back in.
It's true.
Yeah. We need to think about that and what we're missing, what we've lost. So really important.
Absolutely. And it affects a lot more than just our vision as well. It actually has been shown to increase stress levels in humans. It affects our circadian rhythms, so we're unable to sleep as well as we used to. And if we want to discuss animals, I can tell you quite a lot that it does to animals.
Of course we want to discuss animals.
So yeah, that was me guest starring on the Backyard Naturalist. Great friends of the show, Debbie and Lori. If you enjoy nature as much as I do, and you likely do if you're listening to this podcast, because, you know, nature and the night sky go very much hand in hand together. I loved being on the show. I hope they'll invite me back sometime. I'll certainly be sending them this episode so they can have a listen to it. But big thank you and shout out to Debbie and Lori for helping spread the word on light pollution. And guys, I know I've said this a few times in the past, but talk to your neighbors about it. Talk to your friends, talk to your family. This really is a problem that can be solved if we collectively decide to do so as human beings. This is a, really rough time of year for light pollution because we are purposefully introducing a ton of extra artificial lights into the night sky. I'm guilty of it too. I, do Christmas lights on my house. Obviously, we very much enjoy them, but I have them set on a timer. So, 11 o'clock at night, those things are turning off. When we get into astronomical darkness, there's no need to have Christmas lights on all night long. If you're sleeping at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, turn them off. You're just, you're wasting your electricity. You're, using resources that don't need to be used and no one's going to see them. Maybe 1 or 2 people are driving around at 3 o'clock in the morning and they're like, oh, wow, look, that guy has his Christmas lights on still. What an idiot. But you don't want to, be that guy. Not literally an idiot. I kid. But, talk to your friends, family, neighbors, business owners, local officials, if you have the means with which to do that, about light pollution, because it's only getting worse year by year. And if you combine all the problems that we're seeing with light pollution, along with all of the satellites that are getting launched into space, it doesn't bode well for the future of astronomy and our hobby as a whole, particularly visual astronomy, which is something that I have really come to appreciate this year. Just having dark skies to look at and see is hard to do these days because of how gray our skies are. You know, when you're out in true Bortle 1 skies, you can't even see clouds in the night sky. Think about that for a minute. When was the last time, if you're an, urban living person like I am, that you looked up and were not able to see clouds at night in the night sky? You always see them. They're always there. There's always that gray, dark cloud sitting up there. But when I took my first dark sky trip to Bortle 1 skies, I was blown away. Like you couldn't see anything. It was just like stars were there one moment and then they were gone the next. And that's really how it is under truly dark sky conditions. The people of Puerto Rico right now, my thoughts are with them because they are experiencing a huge power outage that's likely going to last at least a day or two. For the people who don't have to rely on electricity to stay healthy, I really hope that they can appreciate this time and look up at the night sky. We're right around new moon. You'll never get an opportunity like that again. Well, you may in Puerto Rico, unfortunately, because they have had a few power outages, obviously, over the years, along with the hurricane and everything terrible that's happened there. But one of the upsides is, if you want to look at it that way, you can go outside and see conditions that you otherwise would never be able to see. A lot of people think that islands are dark. I don't know why they think this. Probably because they're out in the middle of the ocean. They assume that it's going to be a lot darker out there. But the reality is places like Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, etc., and their, cities, which pretty much are all the areas that most people visit when they go to these places, are some of the most light polluted skies that there are out there. I remember being kind of blown away. I met a new, I'm not going to call him a friend, but an acquaintance who owns a local photography shop here in Charlotte, North Carolina this year. And they do a trip to Cuba every year for photography. And they do incredible art while they're down there. But I had asked him, I said, what are the skies like down there? Can you get to some really good dark skies? Because this was before I looked up light pollution map for Cuba. And he told me that, you can find dark skies, but you do have to go a good ways outside of, the beaten path. And indeed, that is the case when I looked up Cuba. You can find some really good dark skies, but you have to go way off the beaten path to get there. And I just hope, all things considered, that the good people of Puerto Rico will be able to, have a look up at the Milky Way, wintertime Milky Way for the most part. I think, I guess right after sundown right now, you can still see the summer core. Well, part of it anyway. But mostly the winter Milky Way is going to be visible at this particular time of the year. Another awesome thing that we did in 2024 was we created a community around the Astrocast. And I don't throw that term around lightly, but we do have a true community going now. And in particular, I want to take a moment to thank all of my Patreon subscribers. I don't get me wrong, I greatly appreciate everyone who listens to this show. And if you can't afford to donate, I completely get it. I understand money's tight. Not everybody can, throw a few bucks at something just because they enjoy it. And I completely get that. But for those of you who do continue to support the show financially each and every week, just a giant thank you for that, because you've really inspired me to keep making these episodes each and every week. Although, with the holidays, obviously I missed last week. So that being said, I wanted to take a moment to thank all of my subscribers. We actually had a new member join as of yesterday. Me and her had talked a little bit. She had emailed the show's email, ruastrocast@gmail.com, asking about getting a new rig. She said her husband was going to be, getting her something, and she wanted some tips and tricks on, what sort of equipment she should be looking for. And I was able to help her out and, kind of give her some pros and cons to each piece of gear that she was looking at, and then suggest some, cameras and adapters and those sorts of things. Anyway, big thank you to Kelly for supporting the show. Thank you very much. She actually joined our members only Discord this morning. If you would like to join us there, we have quite the group of people there now. I'm actually, beyond thrilled. I thought if I could get 5 people, that would be something special. Now we have over a dozen people on our Discord, and I mean just talking regularly, over a dozen. So that's just awesome. And I can't thank you guys enough. I wish that we could share the word of the show a little bit more with people, because I want to get a bigger audience this year, and that's going to be one of my goals in 2025. I haven't spent any money yet on advertisements. To be clear, the money that does come in through the Patreon goes to pay the server fees and software fees for the Astrocast each week. Dark Dragons Astro in particular, big shout out to them. They are now sponsoring the show and helping pay for the server fees. And then the Patreon helps cover some of the costs associated with, Adobe Suite, hardware, microphones, all that sort of good stuff. So I couldn't do it without you guys. And I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for supporting the show as much as you have this year. So if you, like I say, if you'd like to donate and, show your love by giving $1 or $5, we have a couple different levels you can choose from. Feel free to check us out at patreon.com/the Astrocast. And you will get access to the members only Discord, which is a super helpful place. I'm coming to learn, not just because I'm there, but because we have some real experts in there, and everybody has different talents, different sorts of setups. Some people are mono, some people are color, some people do visual, some do astrophotography. I have seen all kinds of different setups, some really unique and cool setups that a lot of our friends in the chat have. And it's a really cool community that we're building over there. And I just can't thank you guys enough for that. So thank you so much. 2024 has been such an amazing year for myself, for the Astrocast, for all of our fans, and everything and everyone in between. Now, that being said, I think 2025 is going to be an even bigger year for us. We do have some really big announcements in store. I have one in particular that I am very, very much looking forward to announcing. But I can't take the wraps off of it just yet because I'm waiting for a few details to get finalized. That being said, we've got a whole lot to look forward to in the coming year. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for listening this year. If you've shared with a friend, if you've, told a family member or a fellow Astro nerd about the show, thank you so much. If you haven't, please do, because like I say, the more that we can grow the community, the more that we spread the word of astronomy and astrophotography. And really, that changes lives. It might sound corny, but it certainly changed mine. And I know that, 95% of the people that I talk to who are big astronomy fans, it's definitely changed their lives as well. One other quick event that I'll mention from 2024, just because it's funny. Something that we thought would never, ever happen finally happened. ZWO released their rotator. So they finally have the rotator up for pre-order. at $250, it's, you know, it's not cheap by any means, but it certainly is by far the most affordable electronic or automated rotator on the market right now, as we all pretty much expected it to be. That being said, I'm not purchasing one yet because there are just a whole lot of question marks that I still need to kind of check off before I consider doing that. I've got questions about whether or not it will work with a filter wheel. I've only seen a couple of videos thus far about the rotator, and the one that I saw where it was being previewed, he had the same questions. He wasn't sure if it was going to work with a filter wheel or not. And honestly, if you can't use a filter wheel with it, why bother? I don't know. I guess if you can use a filter drawer and then you're shooting in color and maybe just like do an narrowband or, you know, those sorts of things, then maybe it's worth doing. But so many telescopes have built-in rotators to them. Then again, if you're, you know, working remotely, like a whole lot of us do these days, another thing we saw in 2024 was the incredibly meteoric rise of remote observatories. They are blowing up. I still need to do an interview with the person who owns one of these places. I've reached out to a few of them, haven't heard back yet. I know they're very busy, but I'll probably try to run one of them down and bop them over the head and let me interview them this year. But if you're working remotely, then I suppose that could be an absolute godsend. But then again, if you're working remotely, you might have the kind of money to throw it like I think it's Prime Luce that makes a really good rotator that does work with filter wheels. I could be wrong about that, though. I'll do a little bit of research on it. And in fact, I was planning on talking about that rotator a bit more in depth on next week's show. So if you want to hear more about that, we have that to look forward to. So guys, that's going to pretty much do it for 2024. Thank you so much for joining me. I guess I'm going to make one last recommendation for this year, and that's going to be go outside. That's the recommendation. Get outside under the stars, go to a dark sky location. If you have not done that this year, there's always next year, luckily. But just get outside, you know, be one with the universe, get under the stars, learn a new constellation, pick up some type of new hobby in astronomy, whether you're like me and you're starting to sketch constellations, or maybe you're trying visual, or perhaps you're preparing for your first galaxy season with a scope that can actually see them. If you are, congratulations. I'm not quite there yet. I can't wait to get a large Schmidt-Cassegrain so I can view the galaxies a bit more up close and personal. But just, you know, keep chasing it, and we'll be here whenever you get back, you know? So we're all in this this hobby, lifestyle, whatever you want to call it, together. And the more we learn, the better we will become. And we will continue learning together going into 2025. So thank you so much for listening this year. I'm your host, Rue. And as always, clear skies. You are listening